All right, welcome everybody to another podcast episode from At Witt's End. I shouldn't have said podcast, another episode of At Witt's End. And I'm doing, a remote. I'm still on the west coast of the United States. Carson is in Upper Austria in Linz, 6,000 miles away, 9-hour difference.
Weather is quite different.
Yeah, well, it's actually cool here, and I'll show you kind of where I'm at. That'll give you a hint. But let me turn around my phone, and there you go.
He's at the beach. He's at a beach club.
Well, you can see the casino there. Across the way is Los Angeles, Long Beach. You can't see it, but for the first time ever in most memory, the mountains, San Gabriel Mountains, are full of snow. They're actually rescuing people up from Big Bear to get them in because they're snowed in for a week and they can't get out. So weather's been unusual, but here in Catalina, it's sunny, a little bit cool. But I got to tell you, the beach looks inviting. The water's clear, and there's not a lot of people, which I like as I'm getting old. So that said, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, it's very not LA to have no people around.
Yeah, it's great. So,
and I guess the weather is somewhat similar because it was a sunny, no clouds in the sky kind of day here in Linz, but it was fairly cold. It was 10 degrees Celsius here.
Yeah. Well, and for people who don't know, I'll talk a little bit about Catalina. They're the Channel Islands of California. Maybe folks in Europe don't know about them. I'd say a lot of people in the United States don't know about them. The Wrigley family that owned the Cubs, the Chicago Cubs, they actually had spring training here. There's still a lot of memorabilia around. There's actually bison on the island. They were brought here for a movie back in, I think, the 40s. This used to be kind of a playground for the rich and famous from Hollywood.
Still kind of is. So,
yeah.
And
I did learn something. Somebody asked last night, is there gambling at the casino? And I go, no, I don't even know if there's ever been. It was a kind of a dance hall, movie theater, plays. And somebody pointed out, and you should know this, Carson, what does casino in Italian mean? The origin of the word. It's a gathering place for people.
Oh, yeah.
It's not gambling at all. But that's getting off in kind of a tangent. So I think today we want to talk about something that's starting up this weekend.
It's a hot time for it because it's beginning finally. The F1 season kicks off this weekend in Bahrain. So we wanted to get a F1 episode in before everything kicks off. Especially because there's been a lot going on with the release of Drive to Survive, which we will get into in just shortly here. But the season's starting up, so it's preseason testing finished. And actually, as we're recording this, practice 1 and 2 just finished up. So the Bahrain GP is taking place in a couple days from now on Sunday. So it's a good time to get the preview episode in. So what we're doing here today.
Or as we do, stream all of them in one sitting or 2 sittings.
What?
The Drive to Survive.
Oh yeah, I think everyone mostly does it. It took me so I guess we'll start into the topic, right? Drive to Survive. Took me a little while to get it because I was to watch it all because I was traveling. But yeah, I finished it in 2 nights basically. And yeah, so Drive to Survive, if you don't know, it's kind of surprising, but Drive to Survive is a Netflix series. This is the 5th season they've had Drive to Survive, but it follows the Formula 1 season and storylines throughout the season and drivers and all that stuff. It's basically a reality TV show for Formula 1, and it is produced and aired on Netflix, and it has accelerated the popularity of Formula 1 both internationally, but mostly in the U.S.
But I would say in the U.S. because it's always been a popular sport internationally. Everybody knew their drivers' names, the teams throughout Europe, and globally, quite frankly, the Middle East. But in the United States,
It is
Not
just it's a
now
boom.
it's taking off. Yeah,
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 it's a boom, and it can pretty clearly be attributed to the series, because of how it's perceived. A lot of people like it, even from a non motorsport or sports background. People like the series as
yeah. People who are into fashion and luxury brands, that's definitely your sport.
it's
Um,
full of
People into
drama.
travel, it's a great sport.
Yeah,
Drama. It's funny when you're talking about the popularity in the United States. This season, they do show some American celebrities in certain episodes. One of them's Tom Cruise, and when you said the popularity in the United States, I said, "Yeah, Tom Cruise made a couple. I think he made a couple NASCAR movies, right?
yeah. Roaring Thunder.
They're
Um,
super fast. I don't. Yeah,
Ro-
so yeah, Rolling
Rolling
Thunder.
Thunder, Roaring Thunder, Rolling
So
Thunder.
now he's. I don't know if he's doing a movie. I know Brad Pitt is,
He,
but now instead of doing NASCAR or Indy, they're doing
I think
F1
they
because that
they
is the hot
are
sport.
doing a movie. Yeah, I think the both of them together.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think that's why he was there. Tom Cruise was like there, and a part of everything is because they were getting information for the movie. As
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
as they're
Getting
just
into the role.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, method acting or whatever it's called.
Well, I will say Tom Cruise. He supposedly likes to do his own stunts. I know he's a pilot. He likes to fly.
Race. I
I
think
think he
he's
likes to
race
drive fast.
cars. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I believe he does.
There's a few actors actually that the most notable because he's probably been the best and the highest performing. Patrick Dempsey is actually a very established,
Right.
well respected racer.
More
Interesting.
of a racer now than an actor.
Yeah, yeah, he does more racing I think than anything else. Interestingly, the actor from why am I blanking on his name. What was the in the show, the show with the three brothers, Malcolm in the Middle? Malcolm,
Man,
the lead actor from
yeah, I have no idea
Malcolm
who
in the
that
Middle.
is.
It was an old sitcom show on like
Yeah,
Fox.
no,
Yeah,
I know what. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I can't
but I
remember
couldn't tell you who the actors
his
were.
name, but the lead actor Malcolm, he's actually now racing in a sub series of NASCAR, and he's doing pretty well.
Oh, good,
So
good.
that's kind of an interesting, but yeah. So lots of connection to Hollywood, obviously, and as always, there's always celebrities at the events. But back to Drive to Survive, right? So Drive to Survive, encompasses the season, and they talk about the major storylines of the season. So I'm gonna start with what I think the big themes were from the season, and kind of cover them real quick, and then we can talk about them a little bit, and then I want to actually get into I think
The news of the
well
days.
the Drive to Survive letdowns for me because I think there
Oh,
was a
okay.
lot of stuff in it that was missed, and I'm kind of sad about some of the stuff they didn't include and some of the more interesting storylines, and events that happened. So first of all, I think the biggest thing, one of the major ones, was obviously Daniel Ricciardo losing his seat, mainly because Ricardo was so integral to the series. Like he is probably the most beloved character on the show, and
Well, he's funny. He embraces the culture, especially the American culture. As you saw in Austin, riding the horse and the cowboy
but
hats and all that stuff.
yeah, he's so
He's funny.
yeah, everyone loves him on the show. He's always great in his interviews. He's always talking to the cameraman when they're in the pit in the pit area when they're just walking around. He embraced the show to the fullest, and he had been there since the beginning of the show. Like he'd been a
Yeah, early on
prominent
he embraced it.
yeah, he
Yeah,
was a prominent driver, and he always embraced Netflix, and he was perfect for it. He was, to me, he was the top like character of the show. He may not have been performing on the track, but he was a fantastic character on the show. So a big storyline for the series, and then it really culminated in the last few minutes where they had a little sayonara, few minutes of video and past episodes that Daniel was in, and they gave a little um, it's not an in memoriam, but a looked back on his time on the
memories.
show. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
just
good memories.
yeah. So that was a big storyline. Next, it's kind of a continuation through the seasons, but the Toto v Christian um, rivalry, I guess. I mean, they butted heads. You kind of saw it really come to the a apex point when Toto wanted the FIA rule changes to help stop with porpoising, and
Right.
in their team principal meeting, Christian Horner said, along with everyone else agreeing, because Mercedes was the lone one out trying to get rule changes. Toto said, "Just fix your effing car," um, and that was a great kind of apex point to me for the season and the feud.
Yeah, I would agree.
But that was very dramatized over the season. The next one, Ferrari strategy. I mean, a major point throughout the season, both in Drive to Survive, but also in the F1 season.
Well, I think during the season, anybody watching the races live, every time Ferrari made a move, it was like even people who don't know racing and strategy said, "What the hell are they doing? Why are they pitting?
Yeah,
They just lost the race." And I mean, it was obvious, at least to me and the general public watching, that they lost some races and basically handed
I
it to Red Bull.
I think in the Drive to Survive, it may have been like underrepresented how bad it
I
was.
believe, yeah, yeah,
They went through it, but like Ferrari had their best chance. Like they mentioned in Drive to Survive, Ferrari had their best chance in years to win the constructors, and they just
they
threw it
had it. They
away.
started out so well so early.
Yeah,
And, the principal was let go. What's his name? I call him Kramer because he reminds me of Kramer from
the
Seinfeld because of his
Italian
haircut.
Kramer.
See, he's the Italian Kramer
Oh.
and a nice guy. You'll see that
Yeah,
I
super.
think the first episode with Gunther,
The
they're, and I
Fiats.
think, yeah, they're driving around in a little Fiat 500 in Italy and going to the guy's winery. So, I mean, that was an episode, not really F1 focused, but
That was a
you
great
got into the
that
characters.
was a
I
great.
liked it.
I would love a kind of like a Clarkson's farm, but if those two just did like a traveling around and like were
Clarkson's Farm was really good. We'll need to talk about that another time.
but
So,
if Gunther and Matteo Bonato did like a offshoot of Drive to Survive, where they're just in their Fiat 500 cruising around the
yeah,
vineyards and chatting, that would be a good like short series. That'd be enjoyable. Because
yeah.
they're very well, they do very well together. Um, yeah, I mean that's obviously, yeah. Ferrari strategy was a major thing for the most important team to F1, as far as like a singular team that's been around the entire time with the biggest
Well,
name.
and a brand that is probably the most well-known super automotive brand in the world globally.
Just
I
one
mean,
of the most well known brands in general.
mm,
It's
yeah, Ferrari.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean everyone knows the name Ferrari, so great storyline, and they picked that one up well. An interesting one, the Red Bull budget cap. So it's seeding the
Yeah,
budget cap. They covered that a lot, and I was actually surprised at how much they covered that. I know
especially since there really weren't that many penalties, or it's kind of weird.
they fined them some money, but like they really
Yeah.
covered that a lot, and I don't know if it was because like that point in the season was a little bit slow, like in terms of storylines. Um,
Well, the
but
other thing that was weird is, when the fines came down, they said they spent too much on like catering and food and
yeah,
like all these ancillary areas. And I'm thinking, well, and then the other principals basically said, yeah, but that frees up money towards the racing side of it.
yeah,
So
it's interesting. And the thing I think they put the most on, like if it was Haas that did this, like I don't think the other
nobody would have
principals would
cared.
have cared as
Yeah,
much.
Port Williams.
Yeah, but it was Red Bull, so every principal was putting their best foot forward to argue like for more
Well, as
punishment.
Christian has said, when you're the champ, you're the champ. You got the target on your back.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking to gun at you. So
And
it is what it is.
they gave him ammo for it. Like
Yeah,
they did do it wrong, and they did technically go over budget, and so they gave him easy ammo to go after him. So that was a interesting storyline, that especially with Zach Brown and how he stepped in with the
the
letter.
letter.
The letter, yeah, was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think Zach Brown may have done a kind of a bad PR for McLaren on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting how they portray the American
Yeah,
both American kind of team leaders. Now Zach Brown's not the team principal; he's the CEO of McLaren.
Yeah.
So not technically.
But on a lot of the chats, people are already saying they want him to
Yeah, a
resign.
lot of so they really did not do Zach Brown any favors in how they portrayed him. And then the other
No.
American at
Uh,
Alpine, no, the team
oh,
principal for
yeah, yeah.
Alpine is is
Yeah.
American Hungarian Otmar Safnauer. Otmar's an
And I got to
American.
admit, when I first heard him, I had no idea he was American, but he's like a Midwestern kind of
He's from Detroit.
general manager at the hardware store kind
Yeah,
of
he's a
guy.
Detroit dude. So
The lovable kind of guy, but he let some things slip through his hands, specifically some
yeah,
drivers.
so that's the other storyline is the the Alpine, the driver storylines, right? Alpine and losing, first losing Fernando Alonso to Aston Martin because of Seb retiring, but then losing
Mhm.
their reserve driver who was supposed to come be a primary and who could be a superstar
And who
to
has, yeah,
McLaren and Oscar
could be
Piastri.
the next Max is basically
Yeah, because he won F3 and F2 in consecutive years. So his first years in both F3 and F2, he won those championships, and then he immediately moved to F1 as a reserve driver. So there's been very few who have done that, and all of the people who have done that have gone on to win a world championship. So there's
right,
lofty
right.
expectations for Piastri, and so Alpine losing him to it's some
Yeah,
dramatic in a pretty dramatic fashion with the tweet, the um
yeah.
the tort.
Kind of a shitty tweet,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
basically saying "F you, I have not signed with you. I'm going somewhere
I
else."
remember I remember reading that for the first time and seeing everything, and I was like blown away by kind of the tone of the tweet. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, for a young guy getting an F1, wanting his break to basically, I don't want to say burn a bridge because, when it comes down to it, it's about money and winning in F1. But the tone of it was like I said, F you.
Yeah, and I don't know how much. So his manager is Mark Webber. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Previous F1 driver for, he was I think at his best with Red Bull, um, but he's a fellow Australian, and I don't know if that kind of came partly from Mark Webber because Mark Webber has seen it and done it all, and he
Yeah, but it's kind of, what do I always say? You got to have good PR people that aren't, I don't know. You need probably somebody who's a PR person outside of F1
yeah
to,
he's it's kind of interesting, and I saw someone talking about this that Piastri kind of redefines the personality of Aussies, right? Everyone is a stereotype of an Aussie
Ricardo.
is Daniel Ricciardo, like
Well,
slamming beers and loud and
yeah,
smiling all the time and sounding Aussie. Where Piastri's kind of just a weirdo.
a young kind of, I don't know, a little prick.
He's kind
So,
of a weirdo,
but
to be
if he
honest.
wins, yeah, he is.
But yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, that whole debacle and the potential court case that never ended up happening, the suit,
Yeah.
um and yeah, that was a big one. Another kind of storyline that I didn't think was a storyline and they just overdid it was the Yuki episode. um
That was probably well, I had to tell, I think that was the worst episode for me.
yeah,
That,
it was kind of
that
weird.
was a sleeper.
It was kind
It's
of
almost like they had to check off boxes we have to focus on. So I thought there'd be more about Red Bull throughout the whole season and the top teams and that middle of the pack. But that episode was pretty much Yuki, Yuki, Yuki.
yeah, it was kind of weird, and
So,
and I get it a little bit, Tokyo GP, Yuki being the
yeah.
Japanese driver. But it just was kind of weird because as much as like he may have had a little pressure on his seat, I think his seat for this year was pretty
It's safe.
solid and safe.
Yeah.
So like it was kind of weird. I think they just pushed it a little bit too much.
You know what's kind of cool, I got to admit, about seasons when you start following F1 during the season, then you watch Drives to Survive the next season. You're definitely a part of it. You go, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like you said, that tweet. And for us, since we attended the Grand Prix in Austria. There wasn't that much, but the fire on the Ferrari
Yeah.
car on that
Yeah.
turn, I was like, I remember that. We're right there,
Yeah.
right by the Red Bull turn, man. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. The other speaking of kind of crashes, it wasn't really a crash for that one, but the Joe Guan
The
Yu
airborne,
crash where he flipped,
yeah,
that was a wild crash. Definitely the biggest crash of the year.
yeah.
And
And that's when what's his name, the British guy,
George.
George. He's such a stiff guy. But I do like him. He's very stiff, very British. But you got to hand it to the guy. He got out of his car to make sure his fellow driver was all
Well,
right.
and
So,
and they didn't.
and I know he wasn't supposed
Yeah,
to,
they didn't actually talk about this, but during that
which
race
surprised me. Yeah,
is well, they talked about him getting out of the car and going over to help during this series, but during the race, um, they talked about his car wasn't super damaged to where he could have
no, he
potentially
could have. Yeah,
driven it back to the pit to get repaired. But once he unbuckled and got out of the
exited the
car,
vehicle.
his race was
Yeah,
over. So
disqualified.
he
Yeah,
basically threw his chance from racing. And at that point, he
and
still had his
points.
top 5 streak going, right? So
Yeah,
coming back from a crash, he probably wouldn't have, gotten there, but he still had the streak going, and that all kind of went away once he stepped out of the car to help his fellow
and he may not
driver.
have realized it, but I just like the fact that he was human enough to be concerned about a fellow driver and the safety.
Yeah, and I think I think every driver when a crash like that happens, they're constantly asking, but to get out of the car, like you don't see that very much anymore, and partly because it's
Well,
against
the
the
thing is,
rules.
he was right there. I mean, if you're a driver, you're on the track, you don't see most of these things. It's all done by radio.
Yeah,
So the severity of that and how dramatic that was, getting airborne and getting pinned up against the wall upside down. George saw that.
yeah,
So I think that definitely affected him.
yeah. So those were all the kind of the big storylines that I can remember. Anything that they covered in the show? Anything else from you
Yeah.
that you can think of?
No, I mean, I enjoy it. We've always watched it since season one. At the end, I'm like, God, is that it? Can't we have some more?
Well,
But luckily, the season's starting, so
yeah,
we're gonna have more
yeah.
live. And I don't know if you want to talk about Vegas yet, but
Well, so you bring up a good segue for me, right? So I think my biggest gripe with Drive to Survive is there wasn't more, because there was more to cover. So the three
a lot
the
more.
three
Yeah,
things that they did not cover at all, or enough in my opinion. So first is the Brazilian Grand Prix. They didn't cover it at all. And that was
at all.
probably the most
Yeah.
interesting race of the season, because that was the race where Kevin Magnussen got pole in the wet,
Hmm.
right? So that was Haas getting pole at a race in
Yeah,
2022. Like that was huge.
that was
Um,
big news.
and they didn't cover that at all. And then not only that, George Russell won that race, his first race in Mercedes'
Yeah,
only win of the year.
and I almost wish I could talk to him and say, hey, how about try a season where you actually do an episode of race?
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on the driver, maybe that's not done and that's not dramatic enough,
Jumping back and forth.
because a lot of the season is repeated.
Yeah.
Because they'll focus on 3 or 4 drivers and you'll see the same accident, the same race over and over again. So
Yeah. They jump back and forth at different points in the season throughout the.
I would love to see almost a more of a, maybe something running parallel, like a docudrama or documentary just on each race.
Yeah. Yeah, 20, like this season, 24 races this season, 24 episodes.
Yeah, 24 episodes, and maybe talk about each team's strategy, what's happening with them, the drivers, this is his race to make it, kind of
not
thing.
necessarily like each, but like maybe have one team focus, and then just like a sub, like not as like one team per race, and then like you follow various driver storylines. But it's because having every team would be a lot, but focusing on
Or
like
even,
one team
what
per
else?
race would be interesting.
While I was watching, I was trying to think of it. When was the terrorist threat? What race was that?
Saudi Arabia.
Remember it was in Saudi Arabia.
It
was that this last season or 2 seasons ago?
No, it was last year season. When with Yemen.
And they didn't mention that at all either.
No.
Which I guess that's a negative thing, and it sheds a bad light. But I would have been interested in hearing a little more about that because never really heard if they caught the guys or what was up with it. Or,
Well, that was just because of like the kind of I don't know if it's truly a war, but the relationship
conflict.
between the conflict
Yeah,
between Saudi Arabia and Yemen was the kind of major the reason why there was a potential terrorist act. I don't know if there was a direct, and I don't think there was ever
threat.
a direct
Yeah,
threat
I don't
to.
think there was either, but yeah, they just happened to launch some rockets, and there's an F1 race coming up.
Yeah, so the Brazil
So,
Grand Prix was a major one for me that they didn't cover enough. The other one, or another incident on track, was at the Tokyo Grand Prix. One of the most dangerous things that happened during the year. So if you remember the Yuki episode, the Tokyo Grand Prix, it was pouring rain, right? It was a
yeah,
lot of rain during the Tokyo Grand Prix, and during that race, when there was a crash, a actual tractor came out on track to remove a car,
right.
and while that was happening, Pierre Gasly drove by the tractor and came within a couple meters of this tractor at yellow flat speed, which is still very fast. So
Yeah.
but never saw it at all because it was raining so much. He didn't see it
Well,
until after the race.
and that's one of the things I do think this season did show because of all the cameras in the cars. When you're behind the leaders, you don't see shit
Yeah, with the
when it's
rain
raining,
going, yeah.
and that to me is uneffing believable. To put yourself in that kind of danger. I mean, you listen to them on the radio, and they go, "I don't see anything." You
But
know,
you gotta like say that in my opinion, that is when the best drivers come out, is because I
yeah,
think cars
it,
become kind of more so irrelevant and drivers
yeah.
become the relevant part of that.
It almost becomes a sensory, you know, anticipating where everybody's at and how to
Yeah,
react because you don't see anything.
that shows true natural ability in when guys are
Yeah,
racing in the rain. Like, and I think it's there is a race that Ayrton Senna did years ago, and it's
yeah,
probably, I think it's his greatest race ever. I can't remember exactly where it was, but all I remember, it was in the wet, and he was just passing everyone. Like, I can see the like clips of him passing everyone in my
yeah,
head, and it showed like that was like, yeah, he is truly naturally gifted above everyone else. Like, it's
yeah.
unbelievable, and that's what I think Rain does. So
So, what was your third disappointment? Did you hit your third one?
yeah, so this is my third and final one that I can think of. And they covered it slightly, but I don't think they covered it enough. So, given what they did for Daniel Ricciardo, and I know he's a big part of the show, but Sebastian Vettel, if a
Oh, yeah,
previous world champion, two-time world champion, one of the most beloved guys in F1 history, retired, and they didn't really cover it a lot.
yeah.
I thought it was,
And I will say, Vettel, when I first became aware of him, I wasn't a fan, but because of Drive to Survive, I've become a
so
fan. I do appreciate him. I like the
yeah,
guy.
and loved when they showed Carlos Sainz's reaction to his Instagram
Yeah.
post retiring. That was incredible. But they didn't do enough for Seb
What was
retiring.
his reaction?
Well, he on camera watched the Instagram story or the Instagram video that Seb put
Oh,
out on
okay, yeah,
retiring, and was like shocked. Like, he was kind of taken aback
yeah.
because up to that point Sebastian Vettel had no social media presence. That was his first post. So it was like,
Kind of his
so
last.
that's why Carlos was like, "Oh, he's on Instagram now. I didn't know that." And then he like opens it, and that's what he saw, and that was all on camera.
Hey, here's one thing I had to laugh about. You actually gave me some rooting about it. So the drivers playing paddleball,
Yeah,
instead of what is the biggest sport growing even faster, I think, than F1 is pickleball in
in
America,
America.
which nobody else globally. Yeah, just in America, and I'm playing. You played before you left for
It's
Austria.
essentially because the sport exists, and fundamentally it already exists in the rest of the world.
Yeah, but this is going to insult, but we're doing it better.
Oh, jeez.
But I got to admit, I don't know where they were in that episode, somebody's house. That court was pretty freaking awesome, and the paddles look pretty high
It's
tech too.
Monaco.
Oh, that was a Monaco court. Is that a tennis ball they
No,
use? I know it's big in
no,
Spain.
it's a paddle ball.
That's not a
It's a
wiffle
paddle
ball.
ball.
It's like a hard rubber ball.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to point out. Other than that, we
But
can move
yeah,
on.
yeah. That because that's where those guys all live. They all live in Monaco.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's easy for them. That was actually a point they brought up. I think Max was buying a new apartment, and they were like during the race, like I think Sergio was pointing to this crane that was part of building the apartment at the Monaco
Oh,
Grand Prix,
Max's apartment.
and he was pointing it out
Yeah,
to Christian. He's like, "Oh, Max is buying a place over there," and I was
yeah.
like, "Oh, that's crazy." But
So, what's your predictions then? Are we ready for predictions?
well, so yeah,
We
let's get into a little bit of the. Let's end it here with the drive side. What did you think just overall?
overall, out of all of them, I'd say maybe a B as far as on the American A B C D E F or F scale. I mean, it was good.
Uh,
They could throw anything out there and I'd like it, but it was like you said, somewhat disappointing.
yeah,
It seemed cut up.
the
Yeah,
so I think A just needed a little bit, a few more episodes, and
yeah,
then B, I think it was kind of hampered by um the drama of the championships. Like there wasn't any, like Max and Red
yeah,
Bull kind of
yeah,
just ran away. Whereas like the
yeah.
previous season, you had Max and Lewis like hammering out to
Right.
the very last
There was a
second.
battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the drama
I
was
will say
like off track.
the other thing, Hamilton. I know he's a great driver. I've always been kind of critical of him just because of his braggadocio when he did talk shows in America. But that guy's fashion sense, and I know I'm an old guy. What the hell is that going on,
Nah,
man?
he's just
He's wearing like sleeping
he's
bags and
just modern.
burlap
He's just
bags for
modern.
color.
Yeah, it's just modern.
Yeah, I don't get it, man. It's just not my thing. And obviously, I'm an old guy,
Yeah,
so
it's just
that's
modern.
one critique.
Yeah, it's just a different
But
type of
Hamilton,
person.
I'll still have a beer with you when we
Yeah.
meet.
So yeah, so let's get into the current F1 season. So, um, yeah, drivers have been shuffled around. Teams are slightly different. Um, Coming out of testing was rather interesting. And it basically came down to this. So Red Bull, I think, is pretty clearly ahead of most teams. They're the clear kind of favorite, and just kind of like last year, they're picking up where they left off.
Yeah,
Interestingly, is who is actually number two. Now Ferrari is there. They're fighting for that spot, but
and I think they have the car, they have the drivers, but let's see if they have the strategy
well,
management.
but what's most interesting is who's the team they're fighting with, because it's not Mercedes. Mercedes is behind. Who it
Yeah, but
no, but who it
but they have
is,
so much money. I don't know.
they could get there with development, right? But the team that is actually
Yeah,
there and fighting Ferrari and potentially Red Bull for a podium spot, Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso.
yeah,
So their
yeah.
testing was fantastic. Everyone has been very shocked at how good they are performing. And then
So I could actually wear my Aston Martin hat around it. You're
yeah,
saying this coming
yeah,
season?
and then a little bit like a little bit of sneak preview. So I watched the practices today. Fernando Alonso was fastest in second practice today, so
Wow.
he was ahead of the Red
So
Bulls.
yeah, just to throw out my prediction, I think Red Bull is going to take it again. I mean, they should.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's a
I don't know about the second and third spots. I think the more interesting for me will be the middle of the pack, the Alpha McLaren
yeah.
fights,
So that's actually the most, I think, another major
and Haas. Hopefully, Haas is in
one
there.
other major point that has come out of testing week and then into the first couple of times or first practice sessions that I've seen, McLaren is terrible, and I hate to say it.
Really?
Not like Lando had a very good second practice session today, but again, their
And
practice
Lando's your
session,
boy.
yeah, he's my driver and the team I root for. So, and it's disappointing. And Lando had been quoted in saying he is disappointed and this is kind of paraphrasing, but he's disappointed in that what they brought to Bahrain, um, is what or the stuff they are bringing to, I think actually Saudi Arabia or Baku, one of the races in the near future, the upgrades they're bringing there is what they should have in Bahrain for this weekend. And I saying that they're behind in their car
Yeah.
development and they are slow, and he knows they're going to be slow. And I think
Mm.
it's just very disappointing. Now in practice,
I'll take that back. Then they may be in the bottom.
yeah, in practice he finished number 4 in FP2 in time. And I will mention this too in FP2, number 1, Alonso was separated from number 20 Logan Sargent in the Williams by 1.8 seconds. So it wasn't a huge spread. And the midfield was even tighter.
So you think Williams will be in the middle of the pack this year? That'd be great with Sargent.
Sargent at 20 is what I said.
Yeah. Okay.
But they weren't separated. There was not a huge amount of separation, and at least in FP2 on soft tires with low fuel, kind of not race pace but quality pace closer.
So
But
the other team.
I was just say yeah. So McLaren could be in trouble, especially early on, and we'll see how it goes. It could be kind of a tough year for them. And then yeah, we talked a little bit about Mercedes. Mercedes is kind of speaking the same way, but at a higher level to start.
Yeah.
But saying that they could get to, competing for podiums in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Toto blow he may pop an aneurysm this year. I think he's going to be stressed out because he is such an intense guy.
It's interesting because
they all are, but Toto.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's actually 3 car design strategies this year, and first is Red Bull's, right? Red Bull has their car, and they're the one being copied by everyone else. So all the teams, most of the teams are copying Red Bull essentially. That's how Formula One works: is you copy the best teams. That's what's happening. And Red Bull has a very good looking, like their aero looks very good, and it works really well in terms of what, like a lot of people are seeing.
I'm trying to. God, what do you call the graphics? What's the word? When they reveal their car,
the launch.
No, yeah, the launch, but the paint, the graphics on the car, the sponsorships,
the livery.
Yeah. No big changes other than, there's some nice.
No, but I'm saying
nice
in just the
graphics.
aerodynamics of the car,
the design, aerodynamic. I know,
yeah,
but I was thinking about nothing spectacular during the reveal.
Yeah, and so they're like the predominant car design. They're at the top, and for good reason, right? Then there's only 2 other kind of cars in the season so far. There is Ferrari's car, and then there's Mercedes car, and that's it. There are no other really major designs. Those 3 have different philosophies, and then everyone else basically copies Red Bull. So it's quite interesting, and there's potential that Mercedes may actually abandon their design on their side pods and everything by the middle of the season if it's not working. So kind of an interesting conundrum with them.
They're swinging for the fence on that one.
Yeah, they're still swinging.
It could be the Ferrari of this year.
Yeah, they're still swinging, and that's how they started last year with their very unique side pod design, and they're still continuing to work with it. But at some point, they may have to give up on it because it just won't work. So.
But what about the Alpha Centauri news?
The Alpha Centauri. I mean Alpha.
Yeah, Red Bull getting out.
Alpha Tauri.
Alpha. Yeah. Alpha Centauri. Oh yes,
because it's a star or a planet or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, AlphaTauri. So I mentioned I think this previously, but AlphaTauri, there were rumors of Red Bull needing to let go of them for another ownership. Basically, they didn't want to sell them. I don't know if you're getting somewhere.
Basically, Didi passed away.
Yep.
There's been a change at the top, and the top has decided to try and cut some things.
Well, in updated news to that storyline, they have come out and said that is all false, and they will continue supporting AlphaTauri.
I'm actually disappointed in that because, as we talked about, I was hoping that gave Andretti
Andretti.
and the first American team
Yeah.
an opportunity to get in that would not cause controversy with the other teams because of
It's
taking revenue and splitting it up.
yeah. Yeah, so they did come out and say
Ah,
that
I'm
is
sad.
a false rumor, but the fact that it came out
It could be just
anyway
P&R.
is
Yeah, it could
interesting.
just be P&R. So, all right. Well, I still got my hopes up for Mr. Andretti
Yeah, so
and Cadillac.
yeah, Cadillac GM. But yeah, so those are kind of I think the big storylines right now. It's cool to see Aston Martin fighting at the top. You have a former world champion that is back intentionally a world championship competitive car in Fernando Alonso with his Aston Martin car this year. Another interesting storyline coming in just into the first weekend along the as part of the Aston Martin team. So Lance Stroll is their other driver. His father
Yeah,
Lawrence is the owner or the primary funder of the team. Um, Lance
yeah.
Stroll actually had a bike accident, and
Oh, that's
supposedly
right.
he broke at least one of his wrists. I think it was confirmed his he had right wrist broken and then had hand injuries as well, and had surgery
Ooh,
where they placed a pin
ooh,
in his wrist, and he missed
ooh.
all of testing, so he had no time in the car during testing, and he was in for practice today, but there was an interesting thing that happened during practice where the pit wall said, "Hey, we need you to change how you go into turn one, so you can have a better turn two." And he straight up said, "I can't," and
Ooh,
pointed to his essentially said his wrist. He couldn't because of his wrist. In turn one, you have to really turn hard and cross your
crank it.
wrist
Yeah,
overs. And when they showed the camera, he's actually taking his hands off of the steering wheel, going into the turn, and moving it so he can crank it further because I don't think he can do
you
enough
can do it
wrist
across.
movement across his arms. So,
Wow, that's
an
scary.
interesting
Wow.
storyline for Lance Stroll this weekend,
Okay.
and how he's going to perform, especially in a car that has so much potential that we've seen has so much potential. Um,
Well, hey, to kind of finish out, I will say this about the coming season too. I did speak with some folks in Vegas associated with Bellagio, MGM, Wynn, and they have sold out all their packages along the course. And they said the people that think they can get a hotel room at Paris and see the race if they get a top floor are going to be out of luck. They said this is probably the biggest event, and they also told me because we've been to Vegas when we couldn't get across Vegas Boulevard. They said they wanted to know where I was staying, and I told them or where we had condos, and they said good because you're not going to be able to get in and out of the Strip downtown for 3 whole days.
yeah,
They said you get in there, you're staying.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm starting to feel better about our investment in tickets.
Well, so
So
I was thinking
good.
about this, and I was like, so we have two spare tickets, to in the same area that we're sitting at the F1
And
race.
still, we have two condos. One's a luxury condo
Yeah, one's a
that
nice.
we bought it, purchased or rented in advance, and we haven't been canceled. So
We'll see it, but I was gonna say I was thinking about this. I am very much hoping that the season is competitive, right, in the
yes,
championships because the Vegas race is the second to last race, right? So
yeah, that's I'm excited
if
about.
it's not competitive, then it's just a Vegas race, right? But if it
It's
is
just a party in
competitive and it
Vegas
comes down
inaugural.
to yeah,
Could
it's
you
just a party.
imagine if the Constructors Cup and the Drivers' Cup are all on the line for that race?
Yeah, and Vegas is going to be important if that were to happen. I
Ooh.
mean, the hype is already there, and to bring a very good
Yeah,
championship would be incredible. Do I think it'll happen? No,
I
but
would say it's the old 80-20 rule. 80% no, but there's that 20% chance. And then the other thing is, even watching drivers survive, the drivers, it's funny. Like the guys down in Austin, they say, "Oh, that race is the best race." You know, people say Monaco's the best race, but the race that everybody's talking about, when I say everybody, the drivers, the crew, is
Yeah,
Vegas.
yeah. Everyone's talking
So
about it.
I'm like, all right, I'm feeling better about it,
Like
and the fact that people paid $4,000 for one ticket to see Taylor Swift for 2 hours somewhere. I'm like, 3 days,
when and
start and finish, grandstand,
it's crazy because you look
almost a
back
bargain.
kind of comparable to Miami, and Miami had some hype
Yeah,
around it, but it didn't have this
no,
kind of
and
hype around it. I don't
I
believe.
don't think the chorus was that great.
No, no.
Personally, I thought it sucked. And in fact, in the episode where they showed Miami, I the fact that they built the phony lagoon and had guys on boats sitting on concrete,
That was
I
just
go,
super funny.
that, it's almost so Miami because it's so stupid and
Yeah,
goofy.
I think it
I
was.
love Miami, but that was dumb.
I think that was actually perfect for Miami. I think that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
I very much Miami. But yeah, I
So,
mean the hype for Vegas
any
is
conclusions? Because people are starting to show up. I'm at just so people know, this is Descano Beach Resort. It's kind of around the point. Like I said, the casino is over there, and around that point is the town of Avalon. If you go that way, you're going up the island. So people are starting to get up for their breakfast and stuff and head to the beach. So I got to probably sign off and get out of here.
yeah. So I'll quickly give my. So I think the drivers is not really as much as interesting championship, because I think Matt's win, and I think unfortunately, I think Mats is gonna easily win it. But I'll give my constructors championship prediction, right? Because I think that's more interesting. Um, and I think Red Bull will take the constructors championship. The team is just too.
Again,
Their team is just too
yeah,
good, right? The
yeah,
team as a whole is just. You look back at their consistency last year. After the first two races, they were just super consistent for the entire year. Like mistakes
yeah.
were very minimal. They were just too good, too clean, and they return everyone basically. Um, I think Ferrari will be number two again, but this is where it gets kind of mixed up. I think 2, 3, and 4 is kind of up in the air
Mm-hmm.
and up to development of the car. Because I think it's 2, 3, and 4 is Ferrari and Mercedes, and then Aston Martin, which is awesome to see a third team get up in the mix at the top of the grid. So I think
I hope. Yeah,
I think 1 is pretty set in stone. I think 2, 3, and 4 are just three teams that are going to compete there. I think 4, 4 through, or excuse me, 5 through 7, I think is a 3-team race between
yeah.
Alpine, Alfa Romeo, and McLaren. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but if they can't fix their car quickly, McLaren's going to be in the bottom of those, behind Alpine and
Carson,
Alpha.
I just think Zach should give you a call because he needs your help.
It's
So
Yeah, it'd be nice, right? Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I hate to say it, it's just like all the news coming out of McLaren, but I hope that Lando and Oster can prove it wrong first weekend.
yeah.
But I mean, there's so much bad about now. Everyone's talking about how disappointing McLaren is looking, and then yeah, 8, 9, and 10. It's a 3-team fight for the bottom: Haas, AlphaTauri, and Williams. I think Haas
But
will be the top of those three. I think Williams will be the bottom, so AlphaTauri at 9.
well, I will pick one from each group. I think Red Bull. Obviously, I'm a Red Bull guy more because I'm a fan of Didi, and I'm Austrian by, you know, and but I have hopes for Haas. I do like McLaren. I like McLaren as a company. I like their culture. I hope they're in the mix, but I don't think they will be either. But I like the underdog in any sport. I just hope Williams does something this year. I hope
I
some of their drivers achieve a podium,
Yeah,
get some points, something,
especially
man.
because they have Logan Sargent, so they have an American, right? So
That's the other. Yeah, I'm hoping that would be a great Cinderella story. I don't think the team would be, but if Logan Sargent can podium twice during the season, I think that would be a huge success for Williams, Logan Sargent, and American F1 Grand Prix. So, or
yeah, I mean,
F1
the
racing.
possibility of that happening is also the same possibility of like McLaren winning the constructors. So 0 to none. Is
Well,
the range.
you're more the technical guy. I'm more the emotional gut feel.
Yeah,
Got my fingers crossed.
that
But
would
I
be
think we
great,
both
but
agree it is Red Bull
yeah,
for both.
Red Bull on both.
But
Yeah, they're too
it is a
good.
sport that can disappoint. You will see what happens.
But yeah,
But
I
hey,
mean, yeah, those are my spots. So yeah, I think yeah, I won this year because I know you have to get going and it's getting busy time there. So excited for the race Sunday, Bahrain Grand Prix. Looking forward to it. Drive to Survive, another great season, and then yeah, looking forward to 2023 Formula One and
right.
the longest schedule they have ever had, the most races ever. So it's exciting.
Looking forward to it. Well, hopefully this video and recording worked out. It's the first time we've done a remote like this. And everybody, thanks for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. Choose till next time.
Ciao.
Ciao, baby.